You might know Danny Brown from his classic album, his classic songs, and some of his incredible features off like Hampton songs and that new Quaratra album. But did you know his signature style of voice was inspired by early Eminem? Here are a few of the ways Danny Brown has evolved his music taste over the years and why his new album Quaratra is going to be insane. There's probably one thing you think of when you picture Danny Brown. The voice and his cadence, his overall demeanor and flow. That was inspired by Eminem, early Eminem to be specific, off the Slim Shady LP. The way he exaggerated his voice, Danny Brown took heavy inspiration from that, and he talks about this a lot on the Flagrant podcast that he went on.
Eminem starts to explode. Did Detroit give it up for him, or did that come from the outside first?
It came from the outside first, definitely.
Really?
I'm like, he's about to be the spearhead of this shit, so let me convert to this sound. Like, I probably didn't rap like the way I rap now before Eminem came out, and I was like, oh, and I just studied Eminem, tried to rap. I would literally just try to rap like Eminem.
Listening to a few tracks from Danny and Eminem, you could tell the similarities. It's night and day. Well, not night and day. No, it's very gray. It's similar. Danny Brown has taken many steps on his path to becoming a musician. For him, this path was very long. He wanted to become a rapper before he was even in 3rd grade, around when he was 6. Only joining the rap group Reservoir Dog in around 2003. And then 5 years later, he released his first solo album, Hot Soup. He did have a track on this album called Reservoir Dogs, and it had the Reservoir Dogs on it. And this album laid down the groundwork for what Danny Brown would sound like in the coming years, even though he would experiment with different things. And even in this early album, Hot Soup, he was talking about some pretty contentious topics that, you know, he would later expand on in later projects. From 2008 to 2011, Danny Brown dropped a lot of music, including his following album, The Hybrid, which is actually pretty good. And then he did a collab album with Black Milk, which I thought was pretty good. The most notable track off that is the intro track, because that's the only thing Spotify recommends me. Around 2012, Danny Brown would take his first big leap into musical creativity and release his album Triple X. Some people just call it 30. This album really hammers in on those deep, you know, contentious topics. Danny Brown is going in like depth about drug abuse, and while he does highlight the ups and like the high, he always highlights, you know, the fatigue and, you know, the downward spiral, and he'll come back to this theme later on. But this was the first Danny Brown album to really, like, you know, captivate me and leave me wanting more, and in 2016 we definitely would get more. But in 2013 and 2014, it was pretty good years for Danny Brown, or bad years the way you look at it. It was at the peak of his drug abuse, and he just released instrumentals for Hot Soup, and then he released his album Old, which is kind of like a party, like house rap album, because there's tracks like Lonely, Clean Up, and then my personal favorite track, Wonder Bread. Very good track, Wonder Bread. And he clearly didn't capitalize enough, because he then dropped instrumentals for Hot Soup in 2014. All while this was happening, Danny was fighting a war in the background, a war with himself. Danny Brown gets very personal in his tracks, and one of the things he talks about mostly is drug abuse and addiction. And this is where he differs from most other rappers. While most other rappers would talk about, you know, the high and like all like the crazy feelings you get from like taking drugs, Danny Brown talks about the downside, the fatigue, the addiction. Danny Brown talks about all that, and he makes this very clear on his 2016 album Atrocity Exhibition, which I think is a classic album. I already made a review on this album, so anything I could say about this album has already been said. Feel free to check out that video where I yap about this topic for even longer. But I really think the album is really close to perfect. It's not the best album ever. There are some, like, you know, bad parts to it. Well, no part's bad. I just think, you know, some of the lyrics get bland sometimes. But besides that, the things Danny Brown is talking about, and like the instrumentals and everything, the album's perfect. You should really listen to it. So as any artist would do after dropping a classic album, they went on a little hiatus. Danny only dropped one album from 2016 to now, and that's You Know What I'm Saying. And I haven't finished that one yet, so I'm not going to talk about it much, but I'll definitely do a review on that soon. I've listened to the title track, and that instrumental's pretty crazy, psychedelic. In most recent news, Danny Brown has shifted into experimental music, and that was solidified with that collab album with JpegMafia, Scaring the Hoes. The two of them said that the album is what they would sound like if they were rappers out of the 80s, because they used some pretty retro equipment to make the album. So what's next for Danny Brown? If he's making like experimental music now, I'm assuming Quaratra is going to be a very experimental, crazy album. And listening to the track Tantor, it's pretty clear. I mean, look at the music video. It's like literally like a computer monster or whatever. I don't even know. Danny is planning to drop his newest album Quaratra on the 11th, so be sure to listen to that, and then my review that's going to come a few days later. But besides this was the evolution of Danny Brown. I'm just another music critic, and the video's now over.
My Sigma Griddy from a Black Ops 3 supply drop.